Hello and welcome to Truth versus Hype. In a week where our investigation on this show into BJP President Nitin Gadkari's sources of funding led to a major political crisis for him and for his party, with the charge against him led by Ram Jethmalani seemed to have found other supporters, Yashwant Sinha, Jaswant Singh, Shatrughan Sinha, also asking for Mr Gadkari's resignation. Mr Gadkari went into major damage control mode, meeting his party's leadership to solicit support. And finally, support came from S Gurumurthy, the RSS and BJP linked chartered accountant and ideologue who went into Mr Gadkari's balance sheets and gave him a clean chit. This temporarily at least seemed to have diffused the crisis.
श्री एस गुरुमूर्ति जो देश के जाने माने चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट हैं, सारे दस्तावेजों को देखने के बाद उन्होंने प्रेजेंटेशन किया और पार्टी इस प्रेजेंटेशन के बाद इस बात को महसूस करती है कि उनके खिलाफ जो आरोप लगाए गए हैं वो उचित नहीं है। उनका किसी भी प्रकार से वैधानिक अथवा नैतिक रूप से उन 18 कंपनियों में कोई इन्वॉल्वमेंट नहीं है जिनके इन्वेस्टमेंट की बात सामने में आई है।
But on what basis did Mr Gurumurthy give Mr Gadkari a clean chit? All that we have are some tweets that Mr Gurumurthy sent out and also an interview he gave to another TV channel. In that interview, Mr Gurumurthy claimed that the seed capital that Mr Gadkari started his Purti Group came from known sources and not, as many believed, unknown sources. He said that known source are 11 companies owned by a Nagpur-based businessman called Manish Mehta. He claimed that Manish Mehta bought ownership of Purti using 47 crores, but then he says that in 2010, Mehta transferred that ownership to 14 companies about which there are serious questions. He claims that Mr Manish Mehta is media shy and that's why he's kept a low profile. But somewhat strangely, he uses that same argument to claim that that's why Nitin Gadkari was himself not aware of how Mr Mehta transferred the ownership of his company from legitimate companies to dubious ones. And on the question of how Mr Gadkari's astrologers and drivers and personal staff were directors on companies that own Purti, he says it's normal practice for investors to ask management to suggest nominees for their boards. But despite this internal audit of the BJP, which has given Mr Gadkari a clean chit, several questions still remain based on Mr Gurumurthy's findings. Miloni Bhatt has those details.
Mr Gurumurthy's clean chit to Mr Nitin Gadkari raises several questions. He says that the initial seed capital for the Purti Group came from 11 legitimate companies owned by Mr Manish Mehta.
But the details of these companies raise questions over their legitimacy. All 11 of them are registered on the same address in Nagpur. All of them have the same two directors. One is called Shailendra Suryapal Singh and the other a very unusual name, Roland Lalit Kumar Harishchandra Powell.
He claims that Mr Manish Mehta is media shy. But is that then a valid argument to say that Mr Gadkari, as owner and founder of the Purti Group, does not know that the ownership pattern of his company has changed? Mr Gurumurthy claims that many of Mr Gadkari's personal staff are nominated to the boards of these companies. Now this is true. For instance, Manohar Pandse, known to be Mr Gadkari's driver, has been on the board of 9 such companies, one of them, Ashwami Sales and Marketing, who resigned just days after NDTV's expose. But doesn't this then contradict the claim that Mr Gadkari is unaware that Mr Mehta had changed the ownership of the company? Mr Gurumurthy then says that Mr Gadkari has no direct or indirect financial links to any of the companies which are owned by Mr Mehta. Now that is not true. Mr Gadkari has lent 26 lakh rupees as an unsecured loan to one of the companies, Regency Equifin, in 2008 and 2009. His company, Purti, has also lent Regency Equifin 95 lakh rupees. Corporate lawyers say that this will not insulate Mr Gadkari or Purti from being probed.
India's #1 news app just got even better. Download NDTV's new app. Fully optimized for retina display. Full screen view. Faster response time. and Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.